decided to move on with them. The first section is going to be on the Godhead, so we may not have them. I don't know. We hope we'll have them by Wednesday. But remember, next Sunday is when the Vaughns are going to be here, and they're going to be teaching this class and preaching. He wants to use that, and we do have one book, so we'll get him a copy of that. But just to kind of tell you where we are. Who do we need to remember this morning before we get started? How's Fran, Keith?
She goes to the doctor tomorrow, and hopefully she gets that cast off tomorrow. And the 6th of September, she goes to have that MRI done to find out why she's falling as much as she's falling.
Okay, so she's going to the doctor tomorrow and hopes to get the cast off.
And on the 6th of September, you're going to have an MRI done to find out she's falling.
And she's going to have an MRI on the 5th. So 6, so we need to continue to remember Fran. I know Delford I'm sorry, go ahead. We need to remember Amber in our prayers. And remember her. I know Delford came home Friday, I think. And any update on him, Ethan? And then what about Wanda? How's she? Yeah. We need to continue to remember them. Chris, it's good to see you back with us this morning. Yeah. Are you doing pretty well now? Good. Good. Yes, Lana Joe. So Wilson had an uncle. Yeah. I hate to hear that. His younger brother, or Miss Stone's his mother's younger brother, Wilson's uncle. Need to remember that family. Robbie?
Ben's wife is really sick. They've called hospice in.
Really? I
Matter of
didn't
time.
realize that. Ben, your son, Ben's wife? And what's her name? I know we know
Tina.
her. Huh?
Tina.
Tina.
She used to work for Dr. Ross.
Dr. Ross, yeah. Well, I'm so sorry about that. Did everybody hear Robbie?
Was that her son's wife?
Yeah, Ben's wife, Tina. She used to work out at Dr. Ross's. Young person. Sorry. Anybody else?
My mom got moved to rehab, and she's doing pretty good.
Good. Good. Okay. If not, Brian's going to do our reading and lead us in prayer this morning as we get started.
Let's pray together this morning. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning thanking you for another day you've given us here on this earth. Thank you for the many blessings you blessed each and every one here this morning. We ask you, Father, to be with all the ones that's mentioned here this morning. There's so many, Lord, it's in our attendance that needing prayers, Lord. I just pray that you just be with each and every one. Pray that you would just be with Tina, and Amber, and Delford, and Wanda, and just continue to be with all of them, Lord, it's mentioned here this morning. We know that you know their needs. And, Father, we just pray that you just lay your hands upon them and their family and comfort them in this time of need. Thank you again for the rain that we've been receiving. Thank you for the sunshine that you've been giving us. Thank you for this beautiful creation that you have left behind for us to live and enjoy this time here we have on earth. We ask you this morning to be with us during this service. Help us study and open our hearts and our minds and be able to take something from this morning and apply it to our everyday needs. I ask and pray these things to your loving Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. This morning we're in our book on the last lesson, 13, page 385. And be coming from 2 Chronicles 9. We're going to be reading 1 through 28. Again, it's 2 Chronicles 9, 1 through 28. Now when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to Jerusalem to test Solomon with hard questions, having a great richening, camels that bore spices, gold in abundance, and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she spoke with him about all that was in her heart. So Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing so difficult for Solomon that he could not explain it to her. And when the queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the flood on his table, the seating of his servants, the servants of his waiters and their apparel, his cupboards and their apparel, his entryway by which he went up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Then she said to the king, "It was true report which I had heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. However, I did not believe their words until I came and saw with my own eyes, and indeed the half of the greatness of your wisdom was not told me. You exceed the fame of which I had heard. Happy are you men, and happy are those your servants who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who delighted in you, setting you on his throne to be king of the Lord your God, because God has loved Israel, to establish them forever. Therefore, he made you king over them, to do justice and righteousness." And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, spices in great abundance, and precious stones. There never were any spices such as those the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Also the servants of Hiram and the servants of Solomon, who brought gold from more, brought algum wood and precious stones. And the king made walkways of the algum wood for the house of the Lord, for the king's house, also harps and stringed instruments for singers, and there were none such as these seen before in the land of Judah. Now King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all that she desired, whatever she asked, much more than she had brought to the king. So she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. The weight of gold that came to Solomon yearly was 666 talents of gold, besides what the traveling merchants and traders brought, and all the kings of Arabia and governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. And King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of hammered gold went into each shield. 16. He also made 300 shields of hammered gold. 300 shekels of gold went into each shield. The king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. The throne has 6 steps with a footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne. There were armrests on either side of the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside the armrest. 12 lions stood there, one on each side of the 6 steps. Nothing like this had been made for any other kingdom. All King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Not one was silver, for this was accounted as nothing in the days of Solomon. For the king shipped to Tarish with the servants of Hiram. Once every 3 years the merchant ships came bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and monkeys. So King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdoms. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God put in his heart. Each man brought his present, articles of silver and gold, garments, armors, spices, horses, and mules, at a set rate year by year. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horsemen when he sustained in the chariot cities and with the king of Jerusalem. So he reigned over all the kings from the river to the land of the Philistines as far as the borders of Egypt. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and he made cedar trees as abundant as the sycamores which are in the lowland. And they brought horses to Solomon from Egypt and from all the lands.
Okay. You know, we've talked about Solomon and David, Solomon quite a bit, and, you know, when we get to this part about his wealth, it's really amazing. What do we, and I've asked this before, but what do we think of Solomon as a king, just generally? Was he good, bad? For the most part, you know, if somebody just asks you that, you say good. And for his young life and, you know, when he became king and then God blessed him, he knew what to ask for from God. We've studied all that. God blessed him with wisdom and wealth. But then what happened to Solomon, as we're going to talk about a little more today? Yeah, he you know, it's estimated he may have had as many as 1,000 wives. And what did he do that so often happens to people? He what? Yeah, he started falling to, so he was extremely wealthy, and he started falling into what they wanted him to do, whether it was build something to worship their pagan god or whatever the case may be. So in the end, Solomon, you know, we don't really know a lot about the end. We do know that God promised him a blessed long life if he would follow his commandments, and we do know that he died relatively young for this time period. He was about 60. He was 20 when he became king. He reigned 40 years, and then Rehoboam took over, so you would assume that Solomon died at about 60, which you know is not that long of a life, you know, for people of that time. And as we go through this morning, anybody speak up that would like, because we're going to try to correlate some of this to our lives today. So we're studying this morning about the queen that came to see Solomon. Why did she come to see him, you think? Yeah, basically she had heard all these rumors about this king that was wealthy, number one, and he was extremely wise, wiser than really anybody. We know that God blessed him with those, the ability to be wise and to have wisdom. And, you know, it's interesting that Solomon, he wasn't wise enough, though, not to have all these wives and not to follow what they, and I don't want to blame the ladies too much. Solomon should have been strong enough to deny what they requested of him, but you would think he would have been, but he wasn't. You know, it's interesting how did God want to be destructive to his people? We studied so much about, you know, the rise and fall of God's people, but the way God dealt with them, as long as they were following his commandments and doing what he said, he blessed them. There's so many examples of that. But then there's so many examples of where the people rose up, living a good life, really, for the time, and God blessed them, but then they would fall off into sin, and then destruction would come. So God at that time showed the world, you know, he wanted to show the rest of the world that he was a good God, and he was influencing through good. But then also when the people didn't worshiped other gods was the most problem they had, then destruction would come. And God would show the world how powerful that was.
He wanted to show the world that he was the one that can control everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Keith. God was in charge. He's and we know that. Now, today, how does that relate to us today? It does, when you think about it. You know, God blesses us in this country, but sometimes I think it's so easy. You know, if you, and I know others of you have, but if you go to a place where people are impoverished and living with almost nothing except their food that they're eating day to day, and, you know, and then you look at us here in this country with an abundance of what we have, most of us, you know, we have to decide where we're going to eat or what we're going to eat, but we don't have to worry about getting it or you know, it's so easy for us. You know, which, you know, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but which, you know, if you don't have anything and you have to really struggle to make it versus somebody that's wealthy, as we would look as wealth in this country, which one's easier to follow after God, or is there a difference? You know, I kind of tend to, I think I think we see examples of that. Now, I know you can see examples of all, you could use all kinds of things here, but, you know, I think it's harder almost for people that are wealthy to give up what they have to follow God than it is some people that, and I think we saw that in Christ's life, didn't we? I mean, Christ, he wasn't wealthy, and the people that followed him weren't wealthy. They gave up what they had, their occupations. Now, Christ doesn't ask us to do that. He blesses us with what we have. He wants us to work. I think that's in the New Testament for sure. He wants us to care for our families. He wants us to work. But the main thing is that we do all that with a heart that's right with God. I think sometimes it's hard for us. You know, we look at people, and I know I do, and I'm guilty of what I'm getting ready to say, but we look at people and we think, man, they've got it made, or they don't even have to work, they, you know, or whatever. But that's not God's design. You know, it's meant for us to work, support our families. That helps us all in so many ways, I think, to resist temptation. Now, there are temptations of work too. You've got to put God first, and that's important. But Solomon, if we get back to Solomon, he followed God from an early time in his life. God blessed him with wisdom, with wealth, but then in the end, he didn't give that up for God. In fact, I think after looking at the end of his life more, you know, there's not much, you know, he's not like David, where I think David repented. We don't know about Solomon, and we don't know a lot. But we do know that Solomon went against God, and we're going to talk about some of those examples here in a minute. So back to this queen. Where was she from? I think that's our first question. Sheba. Where was Sheba? Was it close? No, it was a long ways away, and I can't remember the mileage. I remember reading that this week, but it was a long ways. It was a long travel. And do you think she traveled small party, big party? I'd say it was a big grand party that traveled with her and brought these gifts to Solomon. And, you know, we talked about the fact that she had heard this and her curiosity as much as anything, but why else would she have wanted to go meet Solomon and see if all these things she had heard were true? Yeah, no, that's a
What does he know that she doesn't know? Maybe he could tell her how to get
Yeah. I think all that's very good. I think that's exactly, you know, she was from this other country that had some wealth. Obviously, she had wealth too. And she was coming to check Solomon out, really, to find out about him. Trade possibilities. I think that was very legitimate, you know, one of the reasons she came. How long was she there? Do we know? I don't think we know exactly, but she was there for probably a pretty good little period of time, you know, and she spent a lot of time questioning Solomon and trying to figure out if he was as wise. And then what was the result of her inquiry of Solomon? You know, she left there saying he was even wiser than she had heard about. That, you know, the people that were serving Solomon were all very happy, and he was wise enough to make the rule that he was ruling God's people at the time in a way that all of them were happy, enthusiastic, wanting to serve Solomon. And the queen found that out, you know, and you know, that's another thing. You know, Solomon at this time evidently was a very good leader, people person. You know, it's interesting how we get our leaders today and what all it takes. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, and it's all in God's plan. We know we're supposed to serve or adhere to the rules that are made, no matter who our leader is in this country. And we're blessed in this country that we have some balances that, you know, at least allow us to continue to serve God and so on and so forth. But it's also a struggle, I think, sometimes for us as Christians to see that. But we are blessed in this country. But anyway, back to Solomon. So, you know, it's amazing to me that Solomon was as wise as he was, and then still had the riches he did, and still in the end didn't follow God. Let me get over here at questions and we'll go through them, so I'll quit rambling around. So who else joined Solomon in a trading venture that returned with gold and silver from Eastern Africa? Yeah, Hiram, who was the king of Tyre. And that was evidently a port place. And, you know, a lot of this gold and all this wealth came from other places. I'm not sure how much was mined in the area that God's people were in, but, you know, Africa and Egypt, and then where the queen came from, all those places had mines and evidently a lot of wealth. And then the questions, what did the queen do in order to test the wisdom of Solomon? Yeah, she used, she took what he did. I don't think she was doing anything in riddle or anything, but she was evidently a very smart lady herself. And she did it through questioning Solomon. I think it even says she emptied her mind or something, or something to the effect that she was able to question Solomon. I'm sure she questioned him everything about the government, about his relationship with his God, to whatever the case. And you know, Solomon obviously left her very impressed with his answers, and you know, and knew how to handle her in a way that, or respond to her in a way that was positive. And then she left there thinking that Solomon was even wiser than she had thought when she came. What riches of Solomon did the queen report to her homeland? Yeah. You know, on page 389, that first full paragraph says the Queen of Sheba went home and added her report to the rapidly growing fame of Solomon. She talked about the food he set for his table, the number of his servants, the uniform way his servants and cupbearers who waited on his table were dressed, and the entryway into the house. What was the entryway made out of? Well, no, it was out of that wood, I think. What was the wood that she brought? It was a name for it. Yeah, yeah. It was this, it'd be like a special rare wood that somebody might bring here from another country, but it was considered very valuable, and I think that's what the walk was made out of. It was a true report which I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. However, I did not believe their words until I came and saw with my own eyes. And indeed, the half of the greatness of your wisdom was not told me. Royalty from nations other than Sheba, no doubt, rendered the same assessment as that related by the queen. So it was just hard, and you know, it was hard to fathom how much he was worth. You know, we have people today that are worth, is there anybody worth $1 trillion? I know there's several billion. I don't know. I can't remember if the richest people are where they are, but it's more money than they can ever spend or give away probably. But that's kind of the class Solomon was in. If you put it in today's time in numbers, he would be by far the richest person that ever lived, I'm pretty sure. How much gold did King Solomon have brought to him yearly? Yeah, 666 talents of gold. Do we know how much that was? That's in verse 13. All right, so I've got some numbers here. This is made according. One commentator put that the value of those 666 talents was 281 million back in that day. According to the 2016 price of gold, the value would have been about 1,019 million. So that would have been every year back in that time. That's a lot of, you know, in that time that was just, it was more money than we can comprehend, really. What about the number 666? Did we ever hear that anywhere else? Yeah, in Revelation. You know, it says that it's related to the Antichrist, and I don't want to get into that. That's not what we're studying about this morning, but there's only two people in the Bible that number is related to, Solomon in Revelation. I think it's Revelation 13, if somebody wants to look at that later. So that's unique, how numbers, and we've talked about that a lot in studying over time, but how numbers relate to different people, and how God used numbers to really to send messages, or to any comments on that? What did Solomon make with the gold that came to him? Yeah, he made shields. What about that? Is gold durable? No. Yeah, it was all for show. So what happened to those shields? That's our next question. They were stolen or captured in a battle. They weren't even worthy to go out in battle with those shields. you know, basically Solomon had so much gold and silver that he just made everything that he came in contact with into gold. I mean, made it out of gold. And these shields, the value, I've got that here somewhere. It's like, I want to say $50,000 a shield or something, which in that day and time would have been a lot of money. So then they were obviously there for taking. I mean, that's the first thing when people battled. The first thing they did was pilfer and take the things of value back to their homeland. Yeah.
$1 million car here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. So, we all come across things of value. I don't know whether it's a family heirloom or whatever, it has a value, but if you're not gonna sell it and use it for whatever, maybe to help somebody I mean, really it doesn't, I mean, it's something you just keep, I guess, and hope it may, I don't know. But, we all get sentimentally attached to things, and I know we've spent a year and a half going through my mother's belongings, and that was 2 or 3 generations worth of things. And you know, you see that stuff, and you kind of, when you see it, it brings back memories to you, and it's got value to whoever sees it. But then in the end, you take it home, put it up on a shelf, and you don't even think about it much. I mean, so that's kind of a, you know, and I don't know where Solomon was with all this wealth. He couldn't, I mean, he had so much that everything that he made or whatever was made out of gold, that he probably got to the point where it didn't really matter that much to him. Obviously, he took part of it, and as we said before, dealt with the wishes of his wives to build pagan temples or worship places for other gods. So, you know, I think wealth's a tough thing if you've got a lot of it. Yes.
Old car or old this or old that was handed down generational, and could probably be sold, and you wouldn't have to borrow this money from them, but they value this to the point, I'll never sell this will hand down and hand down and hand down. So there is value, but the value, like you say, is in the memories and in the fact that they're gonna hand it down. Now, the next grandson or the third one down that really don't care about that may go sell that vintage car and it'll all be gone, but they'll be borrowing money against their house, and they'll have something in their garage that, you know.
Yeah. No, that's right. Mark?
Also, too, I realized where this money came from. It came from the people. He overtaxed them, and that's what happened in the kingdom. They split at his death because all the money went to buy these golden shields. People, you know, that's sort of a lesson us learn today. You overtax your people, what happens to you in the end? You split the kingdom.
No, that's another angle to look at. It's like when our government today, they talk about $1 trillion like it's nothing, but really it's just printing money and coming from our tax dollars and our grandchildren's tax dollars. I don't know how we continue to justify that. It's amazing how much money we've spent since the pandemic started. And it wasn't just one party, it was both parties. You know, even in our state was almost bankrupt, couldn't fund the pensions. And now because we printed all this money and no matter which administration, because we take it, now our state's got surpluses like they've never had, but it's not because of, everybody likes to take credit of it. I went up to the ham breakfast this week at Farm Bureau, and I hate to get off on these subjects, but, the governor gets up and tells about how good everything is, but he did part of it, but the most of it came down from the federal government. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and he has done a good job with bringing the industry to our state. But it's fun. It's amazing to me to watch how people try to take credit for everything, even though they weren't the one responsible necessarily. But that goes back to the government passing out all this money that they have and putting us in so far in debt. And eventually, as Mark said, that's the taxpayers. It's not their money, but they act like it is. And that's kind of the way Solomon did. He kept taking all that, and then he ended up with nothing. He ended up not following God and had nothing. And that's a challenge for us in this country, I think. All right. Let's skip down to some of these discussion questions because I wanted to look at a couple of things in the New Testament. Compare and contrast the wealth of Solomon and the wealth of Jesus. Is the accumulation of wealth the most important thing? Why or why not? And we've been talking about that all morning. Yeah, all these things and this money means nothing really in the end. It's all about following Jesus, and I think David did that and Solomon didn't. I didn't really realize until I was looking at this how far off base Solomon got, but there was one thing that was at the end of this chapter was about the horses. God strictly told him not to gather horses from Egypt and bring into the homeland, but Solomon did that. He accepted them. And I don't think that's as bad as him building the temples or the worship places to the pagan gods, but Solomon in the end didn't follow what God commanded. And that's why he died early, I feel like. Compare and contrast the benefits that come to a person who accumulates the wealth of the world with one who accumulates godliness and kindness. And that's the same thing that we've been talking about. There's a couple of places in the New Testament that I wanted to look at right quick. We're going to run out of time. But in the first thing would be in the rich young ruler. We all know that story in Mark chapter 10. The rich young ruler, as we know, came to Christ and said, I've done all these things that you've commanded, and then they get to the end of the story and Christ says, well, sell everything you have and follow me. And he couldn't do that. Did Christ mean that literally? I think it's an interesting concept. I think Christ knew this ruler's heart, and he valued, obviously, those possessions way more than he did following Christ with there at the end, and that's kind of the way Solomon was. But is there anything wrong with having things today? No, it's not at all. But you just have to, in your heart, have love for your neighbor and love for Jesus. And if you live that way, it doesn't matter what you have. But Solomon fell to temptations. He had so much, and I think if people that are extremely wealthy struggle with that. I think they do. And then what about Ananias and Sapphira? So they were willing to sell what they had, weren't they? But what'd they do wrong? Yeah, they lied about it. You know, to me, that would apply to us today. I mean, I think you can't do that for sure. You're better off to keep what you got, not do anything with it, in order to sell it and then give part of it away and act like you've given it all away. We saw what God thought of that. He killed them right on the spot. And I see these people give $100 million to something. And they had this guy, I can't remember all the circumstances now, but he'd given $200 million to something. And they were interviewing him. He said, well, that's nothing. He said, that didn't affect the way I'm living at all. So I appreciated him saying that, because a lot of people give $200 million to something. They want their name on it, and they want to be recognized and talked about, and so that's okay too. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with your name on something, but it's all about your heart and, your love of God. Yes, Sean.
I think we talk about it's not money, it's the love of money. Then I think you've got the widow's mite, where she went and gave everything she had. It just all trickles down to say, if you're willing to realize, like he said, who's in charge, who we should be giving all this credit to, then we can keep all that in perspective.
Yeah.
If we don't, then it really don't matter anyway.
No, that's right. It's so important not to think about the short-term things of this life and remember where we're all striving to get. And that's eternal life, which is the most important thing.
You keep your eye on the Heavenly Father, nothing will go wrong. But a lot of people don't see it that way.
Yeah. And then if we go back to question 1, it says, because gold and silver mean little to God, why do you suppose the author of Chronicles goes to such lengths to describe the wealth of the king? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
The fact that they have all that money. And Solomon, God had set him up so that Solomon could have been pretty close to perfect had he not fallen. And I think he did exactly like some of these other billionaires do today. Not all of them, but some of them. He forgot that all that wealth and all that stuff came to him because God gave it to him. And when he started thinking that, I, Solomon, have all this wealth, look at me, look what I'm doing, then the ball game's over.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I agree 100% with that. That's what's so hard. We get to thinking we're the ones doing something versus God. Even the simple things in our lives, sometimes we like to take credit if it's good, and when times are bad, we tend to look at God and say, why'd that happen? But that's not the way it needs to be. Anytime we're getting something good, it's coming from God. That's why prayer and growing in faith is so important. All right, appreciate it. Appreciate you all listening, and we're going to have a special speaker next week. Y'all bring friends, and I'm assuming we're going to announce at some point, maybe today, that the meat will be here. You can still bring some meat if you would like, if you have a dish you would like, but if everybody would just bring vegetables and desserts for next Sunday, the Vaughns are going to stay, and we're going to have a fellowship meal. So we'd appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing